traumatic experience that happened to me that I recall at that time, at that young age. I was 8 years old, and we lived in El Paso, Texas, and I was nearly abducted to be a cult sacrifice. And when I say I was nearly abducted, I believe, because I am a faith-based person, I truly believe that there were other powers that caused different things to happen for it not to take place. But I was walking home. I was not supposed to be at a friend's house. My mom was supposed to be at some kind of like PTA meeting or, something of that sort. And I went to my friend's house. I was supposed to walk straight home, but instead I went to my friend's house. When I left my friend's house, I was having to walk a very busy street. And it was a 15-year-old kid, but this young man walks toward me, and he knew my name. And later on, years later, we've come to find out it could have possibly been a cult that wanted, my dad was very well known building something in Juarez, so it could have been like, I was going to be like a killing to get money from him, possibly. We don't know all the answers to that. But so this kid knew my name, grabbed me, held a knife up to my throat, and dragged me across the lava rock yard. And as he was dragging me across, from what my mom told me, I don't obviously remember this part, my mom had come around the corner and seen a little girl being dragged. She had no idea it was me. And another guy in a truck had stopped, and they got out, and the kid dropped me. And she told me to get in the car, and they caught him, and he went ahead and confessed to the police of what was going on. Not long after that, my sister was also, she was 13 at the time, I was 8. She was getting involved into drugs. She was very sexually promiscuous. I was following her around and sneaking and seeing what she was doing with these boyfriends. She was just getting in a ton of trouble, already getting involved in drugs. So my dad decided I need to get the heck out of El Paso. No offense if any of you are from El Paso. But he ended up moving and demoting himself within his company to move us back to Sherman, Texas, where he grew up, and so that we could be in a smaller town atmosphere. When that moment happened to me, and I knew, I'd overheard what had happened, my parents didn't come out and tell me what was going to happen to me or what the intention was for me. I was one of those little girls that was very curious and would always sneak behind things. So I was always following my sister around, and I was listening to my parents. That's how I knew what had happened. And I felt as if God had saved me. I truly felt as if God had saved me, and I had a very close connection with God from that point on. And I would journal to him and pray and write, and I just felt like God had me. When we went to Sherman, my sister continued to get worse. None of her actions changed. None of her behaviors changed. And even though she was 6 years older than me, I was desperate to want to help her in some way. Of course, I'm the middle child. I believe also that there's something to be said for that. My younger sister, I don't know if she ever was affected by anything. My older brother ended up being what I would just call like a pothead, and that was just kind of his even keel. He wasn't too much involved. So it was me so worried about my sister because she was causing, in my opinion, such havoc in the household. And I would pray and pray and pray and pray for her. Please save her the way you saved me. Please help her. She was just becoming more and more just out of sorts. And I remember at the age of 11, when she was 17, I was dropped off at her workplace because she was going to take me home from wherever I was. And she sat me down. She was an ice cream scooper at Brahms. And we sat in one of the booths, and she told me how she had had an abortion. And I was the only person that she told, and I was 11. And that really affected me, because I thought, oh my gosh, you killed my niece or nephew, and she put so much onto me. She put so much of her fears, her concerns. She would talk to me as if I was her age. I was seeing things that I should have never seen at that age. Things that I don't necessarily write about in my books that I'm really just lately coming forward and talking about. I was also brought up, my father became an alcoholic. He was a functional alcoholic, but his his anger when he got very drunk at night would be against my brother and my sister, because they were teenagers, and to be quite honest with you, being somewhat typical teenagers, except my sister was even acting out more. And they would catch her in her bedroom with guys, and she would, be crawling out the window. And I mean, they would pay me to babysit her when they went places, and I was 11 and she was 17. So anyway, long story short, the reason why I talk about her is because it really is important kind of later on in my healing and my just recovery of what happened to me as well. But my sister ended up, she tried to commit suicide, punching her fist through a wall. This is something I don't remember. I think if you do work with trauma patients, you know that often we have learned to cope by putting things in what I call like a black box, like you just simply don't remember. And you actually learn how to do that sometimes. Not like I can sit here and go, I'm going to go into a black box, but you just learn to escape if it's a completely traumatic experience, especially if it's someone that you love. And apparently I was the one that helped her when she did that and saved her, but I don't recall that at all. And she ended up, running away from home. She ran away from home and went to Florida. And I thought, well, I just kind of put her out of my life for a little bit. Okay, well then maybe life will get better. But I would just, at that time, just pray and pray and pray that God would do something for our family. It was just in havoc. My father and his alcoholism, my sister and her tumultuous ways, and nothing seemed to be happening. And I was involved in different youth groups, and by the time I was in 8th grade, I was 13, and I had a youth minister of a different religion say to me that I was going to go to hell because I was in the religion that I was in. And I felt, because he was like an image of God to me. He was, he was somebody that was like a counselor. He was somebody that was very important to me. And I just felt so betrayed. And to me, it wasn't just him that betrayed me. It was God that betrayed me, because God was not answering my prayers for my family. And so I purposefully made a mental connection to kind of go, okay, well then I'm walking away from you right now. And I began to drink. I began to sneak out of the house. I began to party. Freshman year, I always call it trying to fill this void of this love that I had with God. But then now, what do I have? And I was so desperate. I just wanted the love of man. I just wanted to be worthy enough. I think that's the best word. I just wanted a guy to like me and to adore me and to hold me close. And, my father, for me, people have often asked me about my dad. Even though he was an alcoholic, he was very supportive of me. He was very loving. But it wasn't that kind of love I needed. Of course, now I understand a little bit more, but at this time, I just knew that I needed the love of man. And by the time it was 2 weeks before my 17th birthday, well, I did lose a boyfriend. I guess I should talk about that. That's still something that hurts. But so I found a guy that I adored. He was 6'10", played basketball, clearly. He played basketball. He was amazing. He was good. He treated me with a great amount of dignity and respect. And we had been dating for a while, but the closer we got, intimately, not necessarily sexually, but just on an emotional level, the more I felt that I needed to pull away. And I loved him. I so desperately loved him, but I didn't know. It was like a fear. It scared me, and I couldn't have him close. And so I broke up with him, just completely out of fear of what that feeling was, of somebody that I could feel that emotion for and then not know what to do with that. But we remained friends, and we were actually going to get back together, and he was killed in a car accident. And it still makes me and that tore me up, and that was something that still remains, obviously. So after that happened, it was even worse. Like my thought of God, because y'all have to understand, for me, and the reason why I have to bring up God in all this, just because God was a huge presence in my life. Even though I turned away from God, there was always this kind of hope that maybe God would come grab me back, or maybe I could turn back to God, or maybe it could all be worked out again. Maybe I could find that comfort again. And in this point, after losing Joe, I was so mad. I was so angry at God. At losing my sister had run away, my boyfriend has died. And I just was like, I don't care. And 2 weeks before my 17th birthday, a few months after Joe died, a friend that I had known since the 6th grade raped me violently. To this day, and I'll be more, I feel like because y'all are therapists, I need to be a little bit more graphic or telling different details than maybe I would talk about with others. But just from him holding my face up and telling me to shut up, to this day, I cannot speak if I'm having intimate relations. I cannot voice pleasure. I cannot voice anything because of being told to shut up, and just violently. And this guy that I had known for years, that I had adored, that was in my group of people, and he dismissed me. And I remember walking out of his house and feeling as if I had had any tie with God left, which was in my mind at the time my virginity, that it was lost. And that I was then not just worthless, useless, unworthy, all the lies that just implanted within me at that time. And so from that moment, I just went even more berserk. I went with many different guys, would have guys come, and one guy I was dating, I thought, cared. I don't even know if I really cared myself. And he would go out and then come and have sex with me, because by this point my parents would go off and travel and leave me to watch my younger sister, because I was the responsible one. I need to paint a picture of what I really looked like to the outside world here. Y'all are hearing the ugly part of who I was. I was an A student, honor roll. I was very popular. My mom was, president of Junior League and all that good stuff. And so I was the one in the family that my parents were like, you're the good one. You're the one that nothing ever bad could happen to. So I had a great responsibility to be that responsible one, and to not show or not tell that I had failed. In my thoughts, I thought I had failed. So I went on to college and chose a college without even looking at it. I didn't care. I didn't want to go anywhere that any of my friends had been, and just chose a college. Plus, by the end of my senior year, my grades had fallen a little bit, but anyway. So I went away to school. Again, had more sexual partners. It didn't matter. Finally, when I was at a sorority function at the end of my freshman year, I met a guy that was like 6'5". Just his demeanor reminded me so much of Joe, the guy that I had lost in high school. And there was just this kind of fire of, maybe I found the right one. Maybe I can have that opportunity to be whole again. I used to say that to myself all the time. I just want to be whole again. I just want to be whole. And I went out with him, and he gave me a rose, and he, romanced me, and I thought, oh, this is wonderful. And on our second date, we went back to his apartment, and he raped me. And on that rape, I remember, and it was, I had like an out-of-body experience. I remember looking up and looking down, and lying there, like, how do you do this when I'm not even moving? Like, I'm not even moving. And so when I left, when he finally took me home that morning, he was a football player for the university. He was vice president of his fraternity. Typical what you hear. Like, I just spoke at Baylor University, and they're going through all that they're going through, and I'm like, I lived that, God, 20-something years ago, but I lived that, and I get it, but every university has that problem. The issue was, I never wanted to see that guy again, but I couldn't tell anybody. Everybody loved him. Everybody loved him. And so I had all the girls, I lived in the sorority house, all the girls, oh my gosh, I cannot believe you went out with him, blah, blah, blah. And it just made me sick, but I couldn't tell anybody. About 2 weeks later, when my roommate and her friend, who is good friends with him, said, come on, go on a double date with us. And I thought, I had convinced myself by that time that maybe I was wrong. Maybe I had done something wrong. Maybe it wasn't a rape. Maybe it was just like the other guys. Maybe I just kind of, put something out there that made him think that he could do that to me. So I went out with him again. And he got my trust a little bit that first night. We had a great time on this double date. So I went out with him again, and he raped me again. In that final rape, though, and I say final rape because that was something that kind of woke me up, if you will. I went into a very deep depression. I went home from school. Wasn't the typical daughter that my parents expected me to be, I guess, God forbid. And my mom was like, you're going to a counselor. You're going to a therapist. Whatever, I don't care. And I went to this therapist, and I don't know what, I don't know what she said that made me finally just say everything, but I told her everything. And she said, you need to tell your parents. And I thought, oh, hell no, I'm not telling my parents, but I don't know, she convinced me, and I think that there was a part of me that just needed to. I just needed to talk. And so I went and told my parents and my dad, they gave me the reactions that I longed for. Now as an adult, it's interesting, and I would love for Diane to comment on this later. I realized that I got the reactions I wanted. I got the reaction, I didn't get the action that I needed. My dad was very angry, upset, hugged me, cared, said the greatest things, like he wanted to shove something up this guy's butt and blah, blah, blah. But when I went back to school, and consciously, and then met with a counselor there and found a good counselor there, and I decided I was going to turn this guy in. My parents didn't come with me. They didn't come down there. And I realized in a lot of my life, I had created my own safety. If that makes any sense. Maybe she understands that. But this is something I've really just come to realization of how I created a false sense of safety. Like, I convinced myself that we had this type of family, but I didn't. Do you know what I mean? Anyway, so that was something I worked with my therapist a few years back. But so nobody came with me. I went and turned the guy in, and it then became this big media thing. It was half the school was on my side, half the school was on his. Professors went and showed up for him. The DA took it. It went to the grand jury. They never told me that they were meeting. He got to go to the grand jury. He got to testify. I never got to say anything. And by the way, I'd also told my sorority, I had 3 girls from my sorority come forward and say that he had done the same to them. I had their letters. They were not strong enough to come forward for testimony, but they wrote and got their affidavits or whatever, and he was still no billed. It didn't go through. From what I hear, he is possibly a policeman in Jasper, and
that's so stereotypical. The fox watching the hen.
And I was invited to speak. I heard that years ago, and I was invited to speak for a women's group from the university, but they were going to a retreat place that I had to go through Jasper to get there. And I was just driving along, didn't realize I was having to drive through Jasper to get there, and I see the Jasper city limits, and just seeing the sign put me into it. I mean, I have PTSD. I mean, it just my mind, I kept thinking, what if he pulls me over? He can do anything he wants to me. He can say whatever he wants. And I couldn't breathe. I had to call one of my friends that's also a survivor. She had to like talk me down. Like I had a huge anxiety attack. But did a great retreat after that. Pulled through. But anyway, so from that moment, I got great counseling at the university. And my therapist, my main therapist, was at the university. And my sorority's advisor, she was great. I'm still friends with her to this day. So I had support. But something I need to share, my mom had come to visit me for some reason, which is unusual. My mom was not a very affectionate person. I knew she loved me, but she was not affectionate at all. And she came to visit me, and we were laying there one night, and I was in a pie-shaped dorm room at this point. And she said to me, I was abused when I was little. And I said, it was Grandpa, wasn't it? And I remember like knowing it, and I remember shutting that down quickly. And she goes, how do you know? And I said, I don't know. And sure enough, she came out because she felt I was so courageous to do what I was doing. She came forward and said that her father, my grandfather, had molested her, raped her from when she was 2 years old to 10, and had only stopped because she had started her period at the age of 10. Because she came forward, now take in mind, they had taken my older sister to many therapists, to family counseling. My sister would never speak. When my mom finally came forward, my sister came forward and talked about the abuse that my grandfather did to her. I shut it down. I was going through a rape case. I don't think my mind could literally hold that much trauma, or deal with it, I should say. My memories didn't come back till I was writing the second book, Redeemed. And it came back in a flood. And when those memories came back, and I believe I was 3 to 6 is the last memory I have. I go like this because I feel like I became whole.
You did.
I don't cry ever when I speak, so I apologize for that. Yeah, so it made sense, not just the God hole that I was missing, but just so much of my actions, so much of what I needed. That sense of reaction, that sense of action that I needed, so much that I longed for. Why I always not just kept quiet because of